She thought he was just her toughest professor. Until an anonymous letter arrived. Until her grade plummeted for no reason. Until someone framed her, and made sure she had no way out. Then she found the photograph. Now secrets older than she is are clawing their way into the light. Whispers of a scandal. A buried past. A betrayal that could destroy them both. She came here to earn a future. But someone decided she was never meant to have one. Read to find out who's really pulling the strings, and why her name was the first one on the list. The morning air in Hawthorne Valley bit with the taste of rust and pine needles. Leaves crunched underfoot as students shuffled into buildings older than their ambition. This was no place for the faint of heart. The university sat like a cathedral to rigor, respect, and reputation, its stone walls covered in ivy thick enough to muffle secrets. Maddie Holloway stood at the campus gate with a map in one hand and a coffee she couldn't afford in the other. She wore a thrift store jacket, boots scuffed with the memory of 3 jobs, and a face that had forgotten how to complain. Her hair was tied up like she meant business. She had come here to escape. Ashford, Ohio was only 40 miles away, but it may as well have been Mars. Her mother, Evelyn, worked the early shift at Buster's Diner. Maddie didn't talk much about her father. There wasn't anything to say. The man never existed, not in pictures, not in memories. Just a blank space with a heavy silence wrapped around it. Her first class was Philosophy 201, Morality and Global Power. Professor Charles Whitmore. Students whispered about him like he was carved from marble. Former UN ambassador. 2-time Pulitzer nominee. Rumor had it he once talked down a dictator in Bosnia over a glass of scotch. He stepped into the lecture hall exactly at 9 o'clock. Not a minute sooner. Not a second late. Tall, silver hair, suit without a wrinkle. Eyes like steel filings. "Let me be clear," he said, closing the door behind him. "You won't be babysat here. If you want easy, transfer out now." The door slammed like a gavel. Maddie didn't flinch. She stayed. Whitmore scanned the room. Paused. His eyes landed on her. Something flickered. A frown. Then he looked away and kept talking. That was the first blow. The second came 2 weeks later, her first paper returned, bleeding with red ink. AC-. No comments. No explanation. Just the grade. Then came the sarcasm. The roll of his eyes when she answered. The cold tone when he called on her. The casual way he said, in front of 50 students, "Miss Holloway, have you considered another major? Perhaps one that requires less thought." It stung. But she didn't show it. She worked nights at the campus bookstore, cleaned tables in the philosophy lounge, and covered shifts at a gas station down the road. There wasn't time to sulk. Only time to endure. But inside, something twisted. This wasn't just academic cruelty. This felt personal. Targeted. Why her? One Wednesday, after a particularly brutal critique in front of the class, Maddie waited. She lingered outside his office until the hallway cleared. Then she knocked. "Enter," he barked. His office was Spartan. Diplomas on the wall. A chessboard on the table. A file cabinet locked tight. And on the desk, half covered by papers, a photograph. A young woman. Holding a baby. The photo was old, worn around the edges like it had been carried in a wallet for too long. Maddie froze. She knew that face. Her mother. And the baby. Her. Her voice cracked. "Where did you get that?" Whitmore turned. Saw what she saw. His jaw clenched. A slow, dangerous silence filled the room. "I think," he said coldly, "you've seen enough." "No. You know who I am. Don't you?" Her voice was low, wounded. You've known this whole time. I suspected, he admitted. The DNA test confirmed it last year. Anonymous. I didn't ask for it. And your response was to humiliate me? You think this is simple, he snapped. You show up here, bearing her face, and you expect me to just embrace it? I expected decency. He stood. Get out. She left. But something had already cracked open. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the start of something that couldn't be buried again. The next blow came fast. 2 days later, Maddie was called to the Academic Integrity Office. They had received a report. Her recent essay had been flagged for plagiarism. Not just suspicious similarity, but word-for-word duplication. A student named Trevor Collins had submitted the same piece 2 years ago. Maddie's world tilted. I wrote that paper. Whitmore was there, arms crossed. He didn't speak. Just handed her a letter. Typed. Anonymous. Attached was a time-stamped screenshot of her login credentials used from another IP address. Weeks ago. While she was working a night shift. Who had access to your account? The administrator asked. Maddie swallowed hard. Trevor Collins. My ex. From Ashford. It made sense now. He'd always been bitter after the breakup. She remembered confronting him for snooping through her emails. He had her password. He still had it. Professor Whitmore spoke at last. This should be taken to the hearing board. She deserves a defense. The administrator nodded slowly. And who will represent her? I will, he said. Maddie stared at him. Why? She asked quietly. He didn't answer. Not then. In every institution, there's a room where reputations go to die. At Hawthorne Valley, it's a square chamber with no windows, a long table, and walls painted the kind of white that feels like punishment. This was where Maddie Holloway would learn what people do when cornered. And who they really are. It was 8:45 a.m. when she stepped into the hearing room. Her palms were damp. Her heartbeat tapped behind her ears. She had slept only 2 hours, her dreams full of burning bridges and shadows with familiar voices. Across the room sat Dean Andrew Harris, sharp suit, tighter smile. 3 members of the Academic Integrity Board flanked him. To the side, a tech from IT sat behind a laptop, fingers already on the keys. And there, standing tall and unsmiling, was Professor Charles Whitmore. But this time, he wasn't her adversary. He was her advocate. Maddie sat. She nodded politely. Said nothing. Dean Harris adjusted his glasses. Miss Holloway. Professor Whitmore has requested to represent you. Are you in agreement? Maddie didn't hesitate. Yes. Then we begin. Whitmore's voice was calm, controlled, an old diplomat's voice, one that had once persuaded men with tanks to stand down. There are 2 questions before us today, he began. First, did Miss Holloway plagiarize her term paper? Second, if not, who did? A beat. Then he turned to the IT tech. Please display Exhibit A. A screen lit up behind them. Log files. Date stamps. IP addresses. Whitmore moved like a man used to cross-examinations. This login, he said, pointing, occurred at 1:03 a.m., 2 nights before the submission. Miss Holloway was on shift at the College Mart on Route 14. Here is her time card. He handed over a printed schedule. Signed. Time-stamped. This login, he continued, originated from a dorm Wi-Fi account registered to Trevor Collins, now a freshman at Northland State. He had access to Miss Holloway's password from when they dated in high school. The same password, I regret to say, she continued using. Dean Harris frowned. Do we have confirmation it was Mr. Collins? Whitmore smiled slightly. Indeed. He tapped the table. The IT tech clicked again. A new image appeared. A screenshot. Trevor Collins's laptop background, his band poster in the corner, open to Maddie's essay, with metadata showing her login, edited and resaved from his machine. And then came the kicker. A campus security report filed by Maddie 3 months ago about suspicious access to her email. The room went still. Dean Harris cleared his throat. Why would Mr. Collins do this? That's when the door at the back of the room opened. Trevor Collins walked in. Smirking. Because she dumped me, he said, loudly. And because people like her think they can get away with anything once they cry hard enough. Maddie flinched. Whitmore didn't. He stepped toward Trevor like he was back at a diplomatic table in Geneva. You hacked into a university account. Forged a document. And then sent an anonymous report to destroy a woman's future, he said, voice low and steely. Do you understand what kind of legal exposure that creates? Trevor's smirk faltered. You can't prove I already have. The door opened again. 2 campus security officers entered. The dean nodded to them. Escort Mr. Collins out. He's not a party to this hearing. Trevor's face went pale. As he was led out, he turned and spat the last of his venom. She's lying. You're all falling for her little poor girl act. But no one listened. Once the door closed, Whitmore turned to the board. This is not about character assassinations or old wounds, he said. This is about the truth. A young woman has fought tooth and nail to be here, working nights, paying her way, enduring ridicule, and when she refused to play victim, someone tried to make her into one. The dean looked at Maddie. Do you have anything to say? She stood. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were glass. I wrote that paper. Every word. And I don't want pity. I just want my name cleared. The room fell silent again. Then a quiet voice spoke. One of the board members. An older woman, hair in a tight bun, fingers laced together like a prayer. You remind me of someone, she said. My mother. She cleaned buildings at this university. While I studied here. She turned to the dean. I vote for full exoneration. The others nodded. One by one. And just like that, Maddie Holloway was free. After the hearing, Whitmore didn't leave the room. He stood by the window, staring out across the quad. She approached slowly. You didn't have to do this, she said. I did. He turned. Because I failed you twice. Once, 20 years ago. And again this semester. She waited. Let the silence do its work. I knew your mother, he said. Briefly. We were young. Reckless. I chose a career. She didn't tell me what it cost. I didn't know either, Maddie replied. Until 2 years ago. She told me because I wanted to find out. I never meant to. I don't blame you, he interrupted. But I took it out on you anyway. I saw your name. Your face. And I wasn't ready. A long breath passed between them. So, she asked, what now? He looked tired. Not old. Just worn down in a way that happens to men who've run too long from things that matter. I don't know, he said. But I'd like to try again. Not as your professor. As something else. If you'll let me. She didn't speak for a while. Then. You get 1 cup of coffee. That's all. He smiled. The first real smile she had seen. Then I'll make it the best damn cup you've ever had. They walked out together. Father and daughter. Not yet family. But maybe, just maybe, on the road to becoming one. The letter came in a plain envelope. No return address. No postmark. It looked like junk mail, the kind most students toss without reading. But Maddie had learned by now, the ugliest packages often carry the sharpest blades. She opened it at the kitchen table of her tiny apartment. Her roommate had just moved out, and the silence made the tearing of paper feel like a gunshot. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed stationery. Typed. Formal. Measured. To whom it may concern. Professor Charles Whitmore is not the man you believe him to be. Attached you will find evidence regarding a certain incident from 1998, connected to a female student at the U.S. Embassy in Vienna. Consider carefully what kind of man claims to stand for integrity. There was no signature. Just a paperclip holding 2 photocopied documents, a redacted incident report from the U.S. State Department, and a scanned photograph of a young woman, not her mother. Someone else. Maddie's stomach turned. She read the report again. Then a third time. The redactions were heavy, but the implication was clear. Whitmore had once been involved in a serious accusation abroad. An ethics violation. Potential misconduct. The record had been buried. Cleared quietly. Now someone wanted it dug back up. And they were using Maddie to do it. She didn't tell him about the letter. Not at first. Instead, she went to the campus archives, to the digital library, to old news bulletins from the late 90s. Found fragments. Headlines. Ambassador withdraws nomination amid allegations. His name wasn't listed. But the timeline matched. The location. The embassy. The scandal that was never fully aired. She remembered his face the day of the hearing. That fire in his voice. The calm force of someone who'd seen ugly things and refused to flinch. But now, had it all been a mask? She took the letter to someone she trusted, Lisa Tran, a graduate assistant with a mind like a scalpel and a distaste for anything unfinished. Lisa read it twice, then sat back in her chair. Who sent this? No idea, Maddie said. Then the real question is, why now? That thought landed hard. Whoever sent the letter wasn't just trying to take Whitmore down, they were using Maddie as the weapon. Lisa leaned in. You need to talk to him. I don't know if I can trust him. Then make him prove it. That afternoon, Maddie walked the long hallway to his office again. The same door. The same scuffed floor. But this time, she didn't knock. He was at his desk, reading. Looked up. Stiffened. I need to ask you something, she said, holding the envelope in her hand. He motioned for her to close the door. She did. Then she laid the letter on his desk like a challenge. Watched his face. Whitmore read it in silence. His jaw clenched once. Then he leaned back, eyes on the ceiling for a long moment, before speaking. I was wondering when this would come back, he said quietly. So it's true? Maddie asked. Yes. But not like they want you to believe. Then tell me. All of it. Vienna. 1998. Whitmore had been serving as deputy chief of mission, second in command at the embassy. It was a brutal time. Civil unrest brewing in Eastern Europe. Tensions high. And the embassy had been the eye of several political storms. She was an intern. American. Bright. Ambitious. Too young. Too fearless. She had brought him a file one night during a security lockdown. They had worked side by side for weeks. She admired him. He noticed. Nothing happened. But someone said it did. An anonymous complaint. Whispers. A formal inquiry. No evidence. No testimony. Just rumors, and a career nearly derailed. Whitmore resigned the post voluntarily. Cleared on paper. But the stink never left. I could have fought it, he said. But I didn't want the girl dragged through it. She was already being eaten alive. So I stepped away. I thought that would end it. It didn't, Maddie said. No. Because truth rarely satisfies the hungry. He looked at her then. Not with pleading. Just the weight of a man carrying his past like a stone in his pocket. I didn't do what they said, Maddie. But I also didn't stop it the way I should have. That's on me. She didn't speak. Just studied his face. The lines etched from years in the shadows. The man who could eviscerate a student's argument in 2 words now looked like he wanted none. Finally, she asked, "Do you know who sent this?" Whitmore nodded slowly. My guess? Henry Mallory. Former colleague. Now Dean of International Studies. Why would he? Because I turned down his offer to co-author a book. And I know too much about his past. Men like Mallory don't like being told no. So what do we do? He looked at her, eyes clear. We don't flinch. That evening, Maddie received another message. A voicemail. Unfamiliar voice. Male. Slow. Calculated. You've made the wrong alliance. Think very carefully about who you trust at this university. Not everyone wears their sins on the outside. Click. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, heart pounding. For the first time, Maddie realized, this wasn't just about plagiarism. This was war. The first name on the list was hers. Maddie Holloway. Marked in red ink. Underlined twice. She found it by accident, in a forgotten manila folder buried behind cleaning supplies in the student government's back room, left unlocked after a late event, while she'd been helping clean up to earn a little extra cash. The folder was thick. Labeled discretionary files, confidential. Inside, a list of students, faculty, and staff, some crossed out, others annotated in shorthand. Marginal notes, coded symbols, acronyms that meant nothing, until she saw her name. And next to it, flagged. Possibly compromised. Source, H.M. Henry Mallory. Her blood ran cold. She flipped through the pages, hands trembling. There were professors on the list. Financial aid recipients. One student marked with a check had been expelled the month prior for disciplinary concerns. Maddie remembered the whispers, no one had understood why. It wasn't a blacklist. It was something worse. A record of leverage. And she'd just become part of it. She brought the file straight to Whitmore. He took one look and closed his eyes. I warned them years ago, he muttered. Mallory keeps tabs. He calls it institutional risk mitigation. I call it surveillance. Why am I on it? Because you're connected to me. And because he knows you won't stay quiet. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Because Henry knows where the bodies are buried. And he helped dig a few. Whitmore stood, paced. This wasn't the calm professor anymore. This was a man slipping into old armor, sizing up an old war. There's a donor gala tomorrow night, he said suddenly. Mallory will be there. So will the board. If we want this to stop, if we want to expose what's really happening, then that's where we do it. You mean confront him? Publicly? I mean blow the doors off this place. Maddie hesitated. I don't belong at donor galas. Whitmore looked at her with the kind of pride that had nothing to do with academics. You do now. The next evening, Hawthorne Valley glittered like an opera house. Chandeliers. Champagne. Laughter like broken glass. The university club was dressed to impress, filled with alumni, trustees, and the kind of men who wore secrets better than cufflinks. Maddie walked in wearing a borrowed black dress. Simple. Elegant. She didn't feel powerful. But she looked like someone who could be. Whitmore stood by the bar in a midnight blue suit. When he saw her, he offered a tight nod. Then Mallory appeared. Silver tie. Smug eyes. Surrounded by a trio of junior deans who laughed at things that weren't jokes. He moved through the room like he owned every soul in it. Whitmore stepped forward. "Henry," he said, loud enough to quiet nearby conversation. "We need to talk." Mallory didn't flinch. "Charles. Always the knight-errant." Whitmore handed him the folder. Mallory glanced at it, then back at Whitmore with a smile sharp enough to bleed. "You don't want to do this here." "But I do," Whitmore replied. "Because I want them to hear it." He turned. Addressed the room. "My name is Charles Whitmore. I've served this university for 20 years. And tonight, I'm here to expose a cancer growing beneath its skin." The crowd quieted. Mallory's expression didn't change, but his shoulders tensed. "This file," Whitmore continued, "is a record of students and faculty who've been monitored, silenced, or destroyed through backroom games and anonymous whispers. Compiled by a man who thinks power is its own morality." He held the folder up. "This is not academic discipline. This is extortion." Gasps. Murmurs. The room shifted. Mallory stepped forward. Calm. Controlled. "You're embarrassing yourself, Charles." Whitmore didn't blink. "Maybe. But at least I'm not hiding behind initials and ruined lives." Then Maddie spoke. She hadn't meant to. But her voice rose anyway. "I'm on that list," she said. "Because I asked questions. Because I didn't stay silent. You tried to ruin me. And I'm not the only one." Mallory turned. For a split second, he looked old. Small. "You have no idea what this place becomes without control," he said quietly. "No," Maddie replied. "But I know what it becomes without courage." By midnight, the file was in the hands of 2 board members. An internal investigation was promised. The university's legal counsel was already making calls. Mallory left through a side door. Alone. The next morning, he retired. No fanfare. No farewell email. Just, gone. Maddie sat on the stone steps outside Whitmore's office. It was raining lightly. The kind of rain that didn't rush. It just stayed. Like it had something to say. He joined her after his last lecture. "You did more than survive, Maddie," he said. "You shifted the ground." She looked at him. "Why'd you really help me?" "Not the hearing. All of it." Whitmore exhaled slowly. Then reached into his coat. Handed her another envelope. Her name was on it. In her mother's handwriting. "I found it in a drawer," he said. "After she left. I never opened it. I didn't have the right." With shaking fingers, Maddie opened the letter. It was dated August 12, 2004. The year she turned 4. "Charles. If you're reading this, it means you finally met her. That she found you, or fate did its thing. I never told you about Maddie because I knew what you would choose, and I didn't want to resent you for it. But now she's older. And smarter. And I know she'll ask the questions I never had the courage to. All I ask is, try. Try to be the kind of man she can believe in. Because one day, she'll need you. And I pray you'll be ready. Evelyn." Maddie said nothing for a long time. Then she folded the letter, tucked it into her coat pocket, and whispered, "I think she'd be proud of you." "Maybe." He smiled faintly. "That's more than I deserve." "No," she said. "Not anymore." They sat there in the rain. No more lies. No more letters. Just truth, breathing between them. It ended not with a bang, but with a chair. Old, oak. Carved by hand. Placed in the middle of Professor Whitmore's classroom on the last day of the semester. A quiet symbol in a room that had seen more battles than applause. On the back of the chair hung a note, reserved for Holloway. Maddie walked in late, not on purpose, just on time enough to feel the shift in the room. Every student turned. Whitmore didn't. He kept his eyes on his notes, but the faintest trace of a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. She took the seat without a word. Her classmates, once wary, now nodded toward her. Respect had a strange way of spreading when someone dared to survive the fire. Whitmore spoke softly. "This is our final class. And like all endings, it is only a question disguised as silence. So I'll leave you with one last assignment." He turned to the chalkboard and wrote 5 words in neat, deliberate strokes. "What do you owe the world?" Then he stepped back. No page count. No sources. Just truth. Outside, snow began to fall. December at Hawthorne Valley didn't forgive easily. Trees stood bare, and statues wore scarves knitted by unseen hands. Finals loomed, but there was a hush on campus, the kind that comes before something begins or something ends. Maddie worked 2 shifts at the gas station, cleaned a professor's apartment for spare cash, and then sat in her empty kitchen for 3 hours with a legal pad and nothing to say. What do you owe the world? She thought of her mother, spilling coffee on the night shift, covering bruises with foundation, singing Patsy Cline to herself in the back kitchen. She thought of Trevor, how pain turns people cruel, and how cruelty doesn't absolve pain. She thought of Whitmore, his loneliness hidden behind lectures, his redemption won not with eloquence, but with humility. She thought of herself. And then she began to write. Her final paper read like this. I owe the world exactly what it gave me. A mess. A mystery. A fight not of my choosing. But inside it, I found something better than fairness, I found purpose. I owe the world my voice, because it tried to silence it. I owe the world my anger, but also my forgiveness, because without both, there's no balance. I owe the world my truth. Even when it shakes. And I owe someone, somewhere, the same chance I was given. Because the greatest gift isn't power or knowledge or even justice. It's the decision to stay. And I stayed. She handed it in on the last day. He didn't say a word. Just looked at the first line and nodded once. 2 weeks later, she got a letter. Not from Whitmore. From the board. The Charles Whitmore Endowment for Ethical Studies is pleased to offer Maddie Holloway a full academic scholarship for the remainder of her studies, along with a research assistant position under Professor Whitmore. Welcome to the legacy. Maddie didn't cry. She walked across campus in the dark, phone in her pocket, wind cutting through her coat. She stood outside the philosophy building and looked up at the office window where the light still glowed. Inside, Whitmore sat at his desk. She didn't knock this time. She just opened the door and walked in. I got the letter, she said. I know, he replied. You named the endowment after yourself. Bit dramatic. He looked up, eyes shining just a little. It wasn't my idea. She raised a brow. The board insisted. Said it was time I left something behind besides footnotes and fear. Maddie leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You already left something behind, she said. What's that? Me. He looked at her for a long time. You planning to stay in philosophy? Maybe. Maybe law school after that. He nodded. You'd be good at it. Ruthless. She smiled. I get it from my father. For once, the word didn't hang heavy between them. 3 months later, they drove to Ashford together. Just a day trip. He asked to see Evelyn's grave. They stood in silence. The wind moved around them like an old friend. Whitmore spoke first. I used to think ambition was everything. It was, Maddie said. Until it wasn't. She made the hard choice. She made the right one, Maddie said. You just weren't ready to see it. He looked at her. And you? I'm still deciding. He nodded. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat. Her mother's letter, the one she'd read a dozen times and still didn't fully understand. She left it there. On the stone. Let the wind take it. Some things don't need to be held. Just released. On the drive back, they didn't talk much. But when they got to campus, as he pulled into the lot, he said the only thing that mattered. I'm proud of you. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Hawthorne Valley, Maddie believed it. Years later, Maddie Holloway would stand at the front of that same lecture hall. The oak chair still sat in the corner. Her name was now on the syllabus. Professor Holloway. And every fall, on the first day of class, she'd write 5 words on the board. What do you owe the world? Then she'd wait. Because someone had waited for her once. And that was the debt she'd spend a lifetime repaying. Write in the comments where you're from, let's see how far these stories can spread. And of course, subscribe so you don't miss new exciting stories. See you soon.